obviously have a lot of fans here, me included, obviously.
Thank you. Last time I was here was for Iron Man 2008. And I missed the food, so I'm back.
Well, I'm sure you're going to get fed better than
I have been fed
Zimmer.
very well. They're feeding me very well.
Nothing gooey?
No.
Because we do have that kind of stuff, you know?
Oh, you have good al pastor. I'm very happy.
Well, we're really delighted that you're here. There's a lot of students here that really want to
good.
do what you do. Right? There's a lot of fans, and obviously all of us are fans of Lion King and of your work. So
Thank you.
we have a lot of questions for you, and why don't we begin? Because our time with you is precious. And the first one is, do you remember the first time that you watched the animated film and where you were and how it made you feel?
Well, I was already living in Los Angeles, so I was an adult. I was in my 20s. So I didn't see it as a child. I grew up with a whole other generation of Disney movies. But even as an adult, I understood the impact of the movie and how wonderful the music was. And as my children grew up with this film, I saw how important it was for every generation. So it was a big responsibility to make sure that I was able to protect the legacy of the wonderful animated film and even the stage production, which is just as successful.
Well, that's amazing. I'll give him a brief summary of what you said. Él dice que él ya era adulto cuando vio la película, ya tenía más de 20 años obviamente, pero desde entonces, desde que la vio, se dio cuenta de la importancia y lo que significó luego verla con sus hijos, y para él era muy importante mantener el legado de lo que es el Rey León. Which, from what we've seen, you've certainly done it more. The Lion King has had different kinds of interpretations, and it's been on stage, it's been on the movies, we've seen like different stage even versions of it. How did this inspire you, and what inspiration did you take from each of them?
Well, the original animated film, I think today is the 25-year anniversary, and the movie still holds up very well, which is wonderful because you're working from such a great story, but part of it is also very difficult because the old movie is still good. So we had to do something that felt connected to it, but felt like a whole new type of movie, so that it didn't feel just like a remade animation movie. And so as you could see, we really tried to make it look like it was a documentary or a live action film, even though it was animated.
And you also, certainly from what we saw, there's a lot of sense of humor that's extra. That's because of what we knew before.
We added to it, but we wanted to make sure that people who are fans, like the people here today, that you recognize all the little things that we kept from the old one and little things that we changed. So while we tried to make it a new movie for younger generation that might not be familiar with it, for the people who grew up with it, we wanted to make sure that you knew that we loved the old one and we're still trying to present that and keep that memory alive.
So, as we were saying when we introduced you, you're a writer, you're an actor, you're a director, you've done so many things.
I'm a cook.
You're a cook. You're also a good one, I've heard. Yes, you are. And how did all of this come into play when you started working on this version of Lion King?
Well, I started off, I didn't go to film school. I didn't think I was going to be a filmmaker. I just wanted to be an actor or an artist, and I was an extra on film sets. And I started to be an actor with small roles. And as soon as they let me onto film sets, I wanted to learn everything that there was to learn. And so all the things you listed that I do really is one thing, which is being a storyteller and an entertainer. And when you learn how to tell stories, it doesn't matter if you're doing it with movies or with music or with animation or even stand-up comedy. It's all the same skill. Humans love stories, and we use whatever tools that we have to tell the story in the best way we can. But it's really the human element that people like. So people like the characters, they like the emotion, the music, that makes you feel things. And so I learned from my experiences with visual effects, with acting, with writing, that it really all comes down to storytelling.
That's really inspiring, and that's a great lesson, because at the end of the day, that's what we take away, a story out of anything in life, right?
That's right.
And doing the Jungle Book before doing this, what did you take from that and kept in this jungle in particular?
Well, Jungle Book made me confident that I could do a movie like this because I knew I had to make it look real. I knew I had to make it look like it was really filmed in Africa as best I could. And we developed a lot of technologies when we tried to make animals that looked real next to Mowgli, next to a real live action human. And with this film, even though there's nothing real that's photographed in it, it's all done by computers, we wanted to keep that same sensibility. And we developed new tools for this film using virtual reality, using a lot of new technology that's become available after Jungle Book. And that made me confident that there was a new way to tell this old story.
I've always found that the animation and the digital effects community is very generous when it comes to sharing this kind of tool, right? Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, all us filmmakers who do visual effects, and there's a lot of great filmmakers who I'm friends with who've come out of Mexico, with Alejandro Iñárritu and Alfonso Cuarón, and my buddy Guillermo del Toro, who gave me a list of restaurants to go to when he heard I was coming.
You are going to have a meal.
But we all help each other because when I saw Gravity, I didn't know how it was done. But other filmmakers show you and explain how the magic trick is done. And so it's actually a very supportive community because if one person figures something out, then you give that secret to the next person and they come up with new stuff.
Yes.
And then that helps you on your movie. So you see all the movies get better because we learn from each other.
Yeah, that's quite an amazing thing. I'm very particular to this community I've found in many years of talking to you guys.
Especially with this type of movie. Because there's a lot of tricks, you know, and there's new ways of doing it. So I've never had a filmmaker not explain exactly how it was done, whether it was, and then they come to my set too.
Right.
You know, so I learned from James Cameron and he came to this set and I was watching him do Avatar in the next stage over. So it's really a dream come true to be around all these wonderful filmmakers.
That's really exciting. And as you were talking about these tricks, was there anything particularly challenging that really, I can't sleep today till I figure this out about doing Lion King?
Yes, because you had to live up to everybody's expectations of what the old movie was, but also surprise them and do new things. So that's hard. How do you do exactly what people want, but still surprise them? And that became a constant conversation that the filmmakers all had of how do we depict these characters in a way that looks realistic, but still has the personality of those characters? How do we bring in a new cast, but still have it feel like the old movie? And so that became about us feeling it in our hearts and showing it to people a lot, especially a lot of people worked on the movie that are the age of this audience, and they grew up with the movie, and we wanted to make sure they liked it, because if they said that's not what Pumbaa would say, or that's not something Scar would do, we would listen very carefully, because we wanted to make sure that the people that grew up with it didn't feel that we changed it in a way that was dismissive of what they grew up with.
I agree. Now, speaking of that, of making that transition, there's certain voices that obviously had to be in this movie, right? But when you were casting voices, what was in your mind? What made you decide who to cast?
Well, the cast was one area that we could change things, because you couldn't really change the story that much. But like if you've seen it in the theater, the animated film, and you saw the play, they're both very different, but they're still both Lion King. And so having different actors interpret these roles gave us something fresh. So like, for example, to hear Beyonce sing Can You Feel the Love Tonight with Donald Glover it's really wonderful. And they breathe new life into a song, even though it feels like what you remember, it's a new interpretation. But there was one role we couldn't replace, and that was James Earl Jones, who plays Mufasa.
Remember. We would never forget that, right?
Never forget that role, yeah.
That's amazing. Now, directing actors that are not on the set, what kind of a challenge is that? That's quite a different set of skills.
Yeah, so we did this in a different way than I think anybody has that I know of, which is instead of having the actors record in a sound booth, when we started, the first time we did it, because you have to do it several times over the course of the 3 years we worked on it, but we tried to get as many actors together and have them in a stage. And they wouldn't act like animals, they would just act like humans, but at least we got to watch them perform it. They had their scripts, it was like a rehearsal for a play. And you'd have all the actors together and we would take the recordings from their voices and use that to animate to. So you got them overlapping, improvising, making new jokes, and we were able to take all of the performance timing that you get, that you don't normally get when you record for animation,
right,
and hopefully to feel more like a natural, have more chemistry and feel more like a live action film.
And when it comes to the songs, Jon, tell me something, because there's been a lot of versions of the originals. Elton John is himself singing it,
yes.
The stage version. Do you have a particular favorite song of Lion King or something?
Well, I love The Circle of Life. You know, that's a wonderful song, and you saw our version of it here. And it's nice because the woman who sings it was part of the stage production in London for 20 years, and she just retired. And Hans Zimmer called her up. She had retired to open a beauty shop, and said, "Would you like to sing the song in our movie?"
Really? Wow.
And she has sung that song hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, eight times a week for 20 years. And so it's nice to keep all of it. It feels like a big family, and I try to include as many people involved in this film from the original film, and people like Lebo M, who worked on the film and on the stage show, because all of the people who ever worked on any production of Lion King still care deeply about it. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't making it my movie, I was making it a movie for the people who originally brought it to life, and also for the people who grew up watching it. So it was a type of project that very different from anything I've ever done, because you felt a lot of responsibility to people who cared so much.
I find it really exciting, and I'm sure everybody here will share that with me, that you kept people like Lebo M, his music. It's just being in Africa, isn't it? It's just the experience of really feeling there.
And we recorded a lot of the music in Africa with Lebo and a lot of the choir. And I think that when the movie transitioned to the stage show, they really embraced the African culture, and they cast the singers out of South Africa. And so we really wanted to continue that tradition. And so many of the people who sang in the movie were people that had been developed with the stage show. And we actually, we worked in many continents. We worked in North America. A lot of the visual effects were done in Asia and in Europe, and a lot of the music was recorded, and a lot of actors came from Africa too. So it really feels like an international production, and I think that that's really in keeping with the spirit of Lion King.
It certainly is. Now, in your prior work, you've always done a lot of really good balance of comedy, and then you go to very heartfelt moments, and that's obviously something Lion King needs very much.
Yes.
So, what in particular did you want to bring into the table that came from your own experience doing this?
Well, I think the special thing about Lion King is how many emotions you feel. And there are some of the saddest scenes in movies in this, but there's also some of the happiest moments. And what's so special about this film is that the characters go through great difficulty, and even though the moments are very sad, by the end of the film you feel really uplifted. And I think it's wonderful. You know, for the people who grew up with it, it's one thing, but remember, there's a whole new generation coming up that this is going to be a new experience for. And it teaches them about things in life, and it teaches them about responsibility, and about humor, and about music, and it's just a very rich story that I felt was, it was important to keep the story going, and not just hope that it was discovered by the kids on DVD, or looking at it on a streaming service, the original one. To see something on the big screen with a group, it's a much different experience. The communal experience is what I grew up with and why I love movies. And as much as I love watching movies at home, there's nothing like watching something that makes you laugh or makes you feel emotions with a group of people, because it's something you get to share with the whole community. And I'm looking forward to this coming out in theaters. And honestly, even being here today, we just finished the movie about a week ago. Wow. And so this is the first time I'm seeing it with a crowd of people. So even your reactions to this really makes me very grateful. So thank you.
Actually, a lot of these young students sent us in some questions for you, and we want to share them with you.
Please.
One of them is, and this is also very true, Latin America is very close to the story of Lion King, even though it's an African story. So what do you think Latin American audiences are going to take away, in particular, from this version?
I think this version and the other versions, It's so much about family, and I know it's so wonderful here that families go to movies together, and it's a shared experience. And what's nice about this is when I was younger, you know, you look at it, you relate to Simba. Now I'm older, and I listen to what Mufasa says, and that makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
I think it's nice is that it's intergenerational, and that you could enjoy it if you're little, and you could enjoy it if you are older. And I think that complements this culture in a very nice way.
You know, I think that's really cool what you're saying, because when you are a kid, and I wasn't a kid either when it came out, but I remember identifying more with Simba than with Mufasa, and suddenly when I saw it again a few years ago, I said, oh. So now it's going to happen all over again. You know, it's a circle of life, actually.
That's right. Each generation comes up, and the older generation has to teach the younger generation. So some people feel like Simba the cub, who can't wait to be king. Some feel like older Simba with Hakuna Matata, and they don't want to worry about anything. And then some people feel like Mufasa, which is, it's your responsibility to, the king doesn't rule the land, they protect the land. And they're responsible for each generation that comes after them. And, you know, the movie ends like the first one, not to spoil it, but the movie ends with Simba and Nala having their own little cub. And so the cycle continues and continues. So I'm very happy that a new generation is going to get to see this story.
You know, that's also another amazing challenge and a wonderful thing to be able to do. People know what the movie's going to be. People know how it starts, how it ends, what the music is. And still, you have to surprise us. From what we've seen, I'm sure you will. You did.
Right. A little bit in the song.
A lot.
Gets a couple laughs. So the better you know the old movie, the more you'll enjoy this one, because there's a few little surprises. And then there's room to, because it looks more real, the humor has to change a little bit. You can't play the moments like a cartoon. You have to play them to feel more like a live action film. And so the characters have changed a little bit.
Right.
Scar, the hyenas, Timon and Pumbaa, as you saw. But also, there's moments that feel more intense and more vivid because you're seeing photoreal animals going through it, like the stampede and things like that.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was thinking and feeling when I first heard about the movie coming out. The stampede, or when Simba sees his father after he's gone. No spoilers, I guess. But these things must be so much stronger when it's not a cartoon.
That's right. And that's why we needed, we used a live action film crew. It was a very interesting process because the whole beginning of it, the first year, was just like if we were making an animated movie. We had storyboard artists, a script, character designs, show reels, and then when it came time to get it into the computer, we built the entire movie in virtual reality.
Oh.
So all the sets, all the characters, all the action was animated within a game engine, and we created a multiplayer virtual reality multiplayer video game that all the crew could put on the virtual reality headsets, and we would be inside the set with all the characters. And then our cinematographer, a wonderful cinematographer named Caleb Deschanel, who had done films like The Black Stallion, movies I grew up with.
Yeah.
He made, he would go in there with a camera crew and light it like a real movie. And we took all of that data and we used that to generate the images that you saw. And so for a moment like, let's say, Mufasa, so much of that is how you play the music and how you light it and how you film it. So that you don't want to look at everything the same way. You want to be suggestive and have beautiful images that are emotional, but not too graphic or intense. And so it takes the artistry of these filmmakers, and they brought that artistry to this project. And so what you'll see, hopefully, the way the camera moves, the way it's lit, the way it's photographed, will feel more like a documentary or a live action film than an animated film.
And that's going to be so exciting because you have all the elements. I've always felt that musicals have every single one of the elements to make you feel things so much stronger because you have all art forms there, all kinds of art form. So is it interesting for you? Is it better or more exciting when you get to play with the music, but with the lighting, but with all these elements?
Well, the best part of the movie I'm inheriting from the previous productions, which is the music. And to have Hans Zimmer and Elton John and Tim Rice coming back and Lebo coming back to collaborate on this and to make sure that it was looked after properly. and to tell me stories about the original film and how that came together, and to capture the soul of that. But we did all of this work on visual effects, and then we went to the scoring session. And Hans Zimmer did something that I'd never heard of before, which is he wanted to have the entire film scored like a concert.
Oh.
And so he invited all the people who worked on the movie to come to the scoring stage. So you had the cinematographers, the assistant directors, the animators, anybody who was around. And he set up chairs. And then you had the full orchestra, like a 100-piece orchestra.
Yeah.
And then they project the movie. It was a rough cut, but they projected on a screen in the room. And we got to sit there and watch them perform the entire score live for us. And I'm telling you, as much as it looks good on the screen, it's a memory I'll never forget, to have live musicians playing it. And the musicians getting to play for the people who made the images that are inspiring them, and then the people who made the images feeling grateful to the musicians who are making them look even more beautiful, because when the music hits the images, that's when it really turns to magic.
People cry when I've seen it in the theater every time, and obviously in the movies, but in the theater when the circle of life begins.
Just the music.
Just the music.
Just the music alone. So what you wanted to do is make images that complemented the music, because even if you sat in the room and listened to the music and the singing for an hour and a half, it would be beautiful. And so we wanted to create images that complemented that and helped enrich it. So it's a really interesting project. It's unlike anything I've ever done before. But I'm inheriting a lot of magic from people who came before me.
It's amazing. Here's another question from one of our students. They ask, in all of your vast experience in the entertainment industry as an actor, producer, director, what has been the most important and formative for you?
I think the most important part for me was having a lot of masters that I could learn from. Sometimes it's a director, sometimes it's, there are special people you meet. I just got to work with Hans Zimmer, who has, even though his background is music and film, I still learn so much from collaborating with him. And I've worked with people like Ron Howard and Steven Spielberg, and directors that you might not even know that well, a guy named David Anspaugh, who gave me my first job. And if you have great experts in the areas, there always is a lot of wisdom if you're just curious enough to ask the questions. And there are certain people who say things to you that last forever and change the way you approach the work. And so I love the experience of having that knowledge passed down to me, to my generation. And I also love, now that I'm working on things where I'm working with people who are less experienced, to try to hand that knowledge down. I learned a lot about it actually working with chefs and preparing for the movie Chef, where I'm doing the chef show now on Netflix. And the way it works in a kitchen is you work very hard for not a lot of pay, and you work under the chef, and the chef teaches you little by little how to develop your palate, how to learn the skills. And that's the relationship in a kitchen, and a film set isn't that different. And so I always try to make the time for people I'm working with to understand why I'm doing something, tell them the way that I think, and then they'll come up with their own voice eventually. But it's without that apprenticeship, the cycle ends. And so each generation is inspired by the generation that comes before them, and if you're lucky enough to have people to teach you, that's something very fortunate, and those are memories that I cherish very much.
This is pretty much the perfect story also to show that. I remember that scene where Simba's asking his dad everything.
Yes.
And you said, ask the right questions. So what would you tell the students in the audience, and even my fellow reporters and journalists and friends that are here, how do you find the right questions for a creative process?
Well, this is a very interesting time to be in the place that you are. If you're students and want to be in film, film is changing so much. Part of it is difficult for the older generation to look at, because we're used to going to the movies every week, and there's all different types of movies, and now there's so many different ways to see stories on screens. There's phones and iPads and computers and streaming services and television, and there's wonderful work being done on all those media. And so movies are just one part of the equation. But it's a wonderful time to learn how to tell a story because you don't need to do it on a big screen to start. You could develop all of your skills inexpensively with your phone, and you can upload it or share it with friends or send it around. We work with Donald Glover, who plays Simba here. The way he broke through is he put little films on YouTube. And that eventually turned into a career as a writing for television and into having his own TV show, and now being a movie star and a great performer, musical performer. So all bets are off now. It used to be that you had to follow a certain path to get an opportunity. But now you don't have to wait for anybody to give you permission. You could make your own stories now, and groups of you will start working together. And it's those groups of people that you'll have relationships with all the way throughout your career. And the only way to get good at it, nobody's talented enough, very few people are talented enough to start off and know what they're doing and do a good job. There's much more to learn than you think when you're starting out. You think it's about luck and it's about talent, but it's also really about hard work. And if you can do it and get the failures out of the way when you're younger, by the time you get the opportunities to present things to a larger audience, you'll be ready. And it's that experience that's going to set you apart and that hard work. And then you can bring your talent and your voice to that. So my invitation to you is don't wait for anybody to tell you that you can do this. Do it yourself. And if people don't like it, keep doing it until they do. Because someday you'll be able to push through if you work hard enough at it.
That's amazing advice. So our time is almost up, but I do have one last question from our students.
I'll try to answer shorter with long answers.
I think that was an amazing answer.
Thank you.
And the question is, what was the biggest challenge, and it's a great question, I think, to give life and show humanized faces and emotions of the animals in Lion King? It comes from the students.
Yeah, that's really a hard one. Because, of course, everybody's like, well, if you just make the lion smile a little bit more, it'll be funnier, you know, and it's like, and we had to stick, I learned enough on Jungle Book. And also from a movie, I don't know, you might be too young. Does anybody remember a movie called Babe?
Oh, yeah.
About a pig? Yeah. So that movie is proof to me that you don't need animals to have expressions on their face like human beings to feel emotion. And also if you watch documentaries like Planet Earth or Planet Earth 2, you know, the BBC documentaries, there's tremendous emotion. And I was lucky because I work with Hans Zimmer, who does the music for the BBC documentaries. I'm like, how do you get so much human emotion out of these animals that are just being filmed with long lenses in the wild? And a lot of it's the editing, a lot of it is the storytelling, a lot of it's the music. And so we use the tools that a documentarian would use. I don't know if you got to see it too much in this footage that you saw. I guess when they were patrolling and they were walking through, Simba and Mufasa were walking through past the spider web and past all the animals in the grass. But it's amazing how much that music and that imagery, if it's photographed in a realistic way, makes you feel. And we really tried to extend that through the whole film. So we could have done it a different way. Other movies have tried different approaches, but the rules that I created around this was, let's treat the animals like animals. And let's let the emotion come from their behavior as animals. So if they're being silly and they're a warthog, they're not making faces, they're jumping and skipping around like you saw. And I think now that we've seen the whole movie, as I've watched the whole thing, I think it works really well. But you're taking a chance and you could be wrong. But that was the approach that we took, and I think it's working quite well.
Well, I think we all do, don't we? Yeah. I really thank you so much in the name of everybody here. It's an honor to have you here. We appreciate your sharing your knowledge, your experience, and can't wait to see the movie in July.
Thank you, and thank you for making me feel so at home here. I appreciate it so much. Thank you, Mexico.
We have a tradition. Would you take a picture with the whole audience, please? There's a photographer. Thank you so much, Jon Favreau. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Such an honor.
Where do you want me to stand? Where do I go?
Please.
Should I put this down?
Okay, so I'm getting... This is the guy who knows.
All right, everybody, you ready?